Hey guys, it's me again. No surprise, I guess you know me by now. This week, I'm really excited to speak with you. I'm going to be most of your lesson for this week, as well as reading the text. I'm not going to make you do a TED talk or anything like that because Buddhism is my shit. This is where I live. I am a Christian pastor, as you know. I fell in love with Buddhism. Let me tell you a little bit of my story first off. Was doing my doctorate, doing some work at Princeton, and on I had to do a reading list for spirituality. My doctorate's in spiritual practices, and I had to look at different kinds of spiritual practices. And one of the ones I began to look at was Buddhism. As I read Buddhism, one of the things that really stuck with me, or struck me rather, is how very much I saw Jesus in the story of Buddhism and in the Buddha's teaching. And I began to wonder how how two spiritual paths can be so parallel to each other, literally 600 years apart. And I began to see Jesus and Buddhism in a way that I never thought I would, because growing up as a fundamentalist evangelical Christian, I could never read Buddhism. I would never think about another religion because that didn't glorify God and that was the devil. That's not where I am now spiritually by any means. And I personally found that learning about Buddhism has helped me be a better Christian. So much so that I knew on my first sabbatical, I wanted to go to a monastery and experience Buddhism firsthand. Spiritual practices are meant to be lived, not read. You're meant to experience them. And so my goal was to go and absorb myself in Buddhism and see what this was about. So not last summer, but the summer before, 2 years ago almost, I took my sabbatical and I spent 3 months in Kathmandu, Nepal at the Kopan Monastery, which is a Mahayana Buddhist monastery just south of Tibet in the hills of rural Nepal, just outside Kathmandu. Absolutely fell in love. I left there as enamored with Buddhism as before, even more so. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't convert. I didn't want to convert. That wasn't my reason for going. I came back a stronger Christian. And let me be honest, and I don't mean to offend anybody who is Christian. I came back a stronger follower of Jesus. And I began to understand what it is about American Christianity that I hate. I'm probably the only pastor who openly says, I really love Jesus, but I don't like his fan club. I find Christians to be extremely mean, judgmental, and absorbed, self-absorbed. I find it a very narcissistic spiritual experience and frankly antithetical to anything Jesus taught most of the time, which is why I continue to do what I do, because I think there needs to be a better way and someone needs to stay and fight for what's right. That's an aside. And so I found myself being extremely enamored with Buddhism in a way that taught me personally what it meant to look at Christ through different eyes. The best analogy I can give to people is that if you hear the same story over and over and over again, sometimes it helps to look at it through different glasses, to have different lenses, to look at the same story and look at something new and see something fresh. Because sometimes the same old stories you begin to take them for granted because they come so normal for you. Buddhism did that for me. I began to see the teachings of Jesus in a very different way. I'm not going to really go into the Christian aspects tonight because we're talking about Buddhism, but if you are a Christian, if you were versed in the Christian tradition growing up, listen to what I say tonight and see if you see any of the correlations as well. And yes, I'm drinking coffee. I always drink coffee, and I will share with you my favorite mug. My assistant pastor at church gave this to me when I got back from the monastery, and I think it's hysterical. And I apologize if I am shocking you as a Christian pastor. Let's move into Buddhism. Is Buddhism a religion or is Buddhism a philosophy? I think it depends on whom you are speaking to. There are schools of thought in both, and I'll give you my opinion, because your book does not really talk about this. And I was a little disappointed that Stephanie did not talk about this when she wrote your text. Clifford Geertz from Princeton says that Buddhism is a religion because it has all of the ritual and symbolism and the cyclical things that religion has. And so it meets the criterion of religion in terms of cultus and ritual and all the things that religion should have. I think it can be viewed that way, and for many people it's practiced as a religion, although most Buddhists will tell you it's a philosophy, it's a way of life. The one thing that I don't think your book really hit as hard as I would like it to is that Buddhism is atheistic. It does not mean they're atheists in the sense that we say American modern atheists. It is atheistic, meaning non-theistic. Buddhists do not have a divine presence. There is no God in Buddhism. Excuse me. The closest they come would be talking about the sense of enlightenment, that state of enlightenment that is out there. There is an enlightenment that is beyond us, that all-knowing wisdom that is beyond us, that they would not refer to as God, but somebody like me, a liberal Christian, would say, well, honestly, the eternal source of enlightenment sounds to me like God. I don't see much of a difference in that, but they're very clear. There is no creator God who is in constant relationship with the world, who watches over us, who cares for us. There is no sense of omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence with God in the same way that Christians would speak of God. And so they are atheistic in that sense. If I consider Buddhism to be a religion, I have to be honest, I don't think I could follow it and still be Christian. I think I would have to choose one or the other. But if Buddhism is a philosophy, I think it I don't know how to say this to you. I think it goes very well in tandem with Christianity. I think it flavors Christianity in a very, very unique way. And I think they mesh together really well. And so for me, I define myself as a Buddhist Christian. Buddhist is the adjective, small b. Christian is the noun, capital C. I am a Christian, but I'm a Christian whose understanding of Christ is formed by the philosophies of Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha. If I were, for instance, to claim the faith of Islam or of Hindu, I could not then also call myself a Christian for me, because those are both religions. And you take one religion or the other, I don't know that I could necessarily claim the identity of both. I would just be a universalist at that point. We'll talk about universalism another time. I think for me, Buddhism is a philosophy, and that philosophy can influence so much of our life. And I will be very, very honest with you. I hope when I'm done with this that you will let Buddhism affect your life as well, because the philosophy of Buddhism makes all of us better people and, quite frankly, would make us a better world. The book talks about Buddha. I want to tell you that Buddha is Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha was his first name. He was of the Shakyamuni clan. One of the terms that's used is the Shakyamuni Buddha. The Shakyamuni clan was a clan of India. Buddha was not Asian. Not traditionally Asian. He was Southeast Asian, particularly Indian. He was from India. A very, very well-off prince. Your book goes into his story a bit. After being cloistered in the castle for many years, in the palace for many, many years, Buddha left and went out into the world on his own and began to see suffering for his very first time, and was shocked at what he saw because he'd become so sheltered by his life. And he began to wonder why it was that people suffered. What is the nature of suffering? And I need you to understand that Buddhism is a philosophy that's all about the interplay between suffering and compassion. If you could describe Buddhism in one phrase, it would be the interplay between that tension between suffering and compassion. And I think that's what we need to keep in our minds. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree for many, many years and prayed and prayed and prayed, meditated, and finally came to enlightenment. Enlightenment, in this case, let me just say that Siddhartha did not invent Buddhism. There is no invention here. This is not his thoughts. This is his understanding and observations of the nature of life as he understood them. This is not something he invented. This is something he observed. Okay, so he didn't come up with this. He observed it and put it together in a codified fashion. But that codified fashion is not his invention. It's his observation, so to speak. Now, what he came up with are the four noble truths of Buddhism. Dukkha, suffering. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that suffering exists. Everything comes to suffering. Everything. And this is really, really interesting and important for you to understand. Everything comes to suffering. Buddhism is often, I think, misappropriated as or misunderstood as a depressing religion. It's such a pessimistic philosophy. It isn't at all. If you think Buddhism is a pessimistic philosophy, you don't understand Buddhism and you need to relearn it. But the First Noble Truth says everything leads to suffering. Now that sounds terribly pessimistic, but it is true. And the older I get, the truer it gets for me. Let me give you a couple of examples. That new car that I could not wait to buy that's in my driveway, it needs repaired. It has things that are falling apart. There are some trim pieces that need to be fixed. Today, I put a new taillight in it. The house that I live in, that I absolutely love, needs to be repaired. My body is going to change. I turned 50 and it was like my warranty ran out. I'm falling apart. It's just what it is. Everything leads to suffering. Okay? That's the first truth of Buddhism. And it's true. There is nothing you have in this world that will not bring you suffering at some point. The pet you love will one day die. Your health will fail. The beauty that you look in a mirror and enjoy at 21, 22 years old will not be there anymore when you're 50. Your hairline will recede. Your belly will expand. The things that we take pride in, they lead to suffering. Now, the second noble truth, if all things lead to suffering, the cause of suffering is detachment. Okay? Is attachment. I'm sorry. The cause of suffering is attachment. The reason we suffer is because we are attached to things. Now, when my car causes me to suffer because I absolutely love my car and it's totaled in an accident and I lose my car and I'm devastated because I loved that new car, that's caused by attachment. When I am devastated because I have a bald spot in the back of my head you can't see because of where I'm sitting in the camera, and that is intentional, by the way, or you can't see my pot belly because I'm sitting down, that's also intentional, by the way. The suffering that comes from the realization that I'm no longer what I used to be, that's caused by attachment. Attachment, or clinging to things that don't matter, clinging to things that are nice but don't give meaning. And that's important to know. It's okay to like things. Buddhists don't sit around and not enjoy anything. It just means that it doesn't give you meaning. It doesn't give you value. Your job is not who you are. If you lose your job, you're going to have problems. If you lose your job, you're going to be upset. But your worth as a human being, your dignity, your ability to love and be loved, your ability to have relationship is not in what you do for a living. You can be just as good, honorable, and loving a person, whether if you're the president of the college or if you clean the toilets in the college. Okay? That's attachment. Attachment brings suffering. When I am overly attached to things, that's when I get to suffering, because that is misappropriated value. Things can be enjoyed. I'm not saying don't enjoy things. All I'm saying is don't let them define you. Don't let those relationships to things be more important than the most important things in life. We'll get to that. Okay. In the monastery, one of the lamas that was teaching us. A lama is a teacher in Buddhism. Must have really had a thing for chocolate, because kept talking about chocolate all the time, and said, I love chocolate. I adore chocolate, but chocolate doesn't last. I have a piece of chocolate and I'm satisfied, but then a little while later I want more chocolate and I have another piece of chocolate and that feels good and I enjoy it, but it's not satisfying. It doesn't last. Clinging to things is false because we cling to things that don't last. That's Buddhist philosophy. And to get preachy, that's Christian philosophy as well. And this is where I started seeing the two meld together, which made me think about my own faith in a new way. I like certain things, but those things don't define me. And they're best enjoyed when I realize that those things also don't last. The things I love are here to be loved, and they're here to be enjoyed, and they're here to be used. But they're not here to give me purpose, and they're not going to last forever. Now, if suffering exists, and suffering comes from attachment, the key to getting rid of attachment is through the practice of detachment. I need to learn to detach from the things in my life that are giving me suffering. That doesn't mean you don't care about things. It means you put them in their proper perspective. You begin to realize that while you love your car, while you love your home, while your job brings you immense joy, those are things. They don't define the value of who you are as a human being. They don't make you lovable. They don't make you worthwhile. That's really, really hard for us to wrap our mind around if you're an American, because, or even a Western of any kind, but especially American. We live in a society that says that you're valued by what you have. The one who dies with the most toys wins. Buddhism would challenge me to say the one who dies with the most toys is dead. Bottom line. I have never once in my life seen a hearse that carried a U-Haul. It just isn't there. The things that matter in this life are not the stuff we have. It's the people we love and the relationships we carry and the compassion and kindness that we live with in our life. That's what Buddha would say gives us our value and our worth. I feel like I'm getting preachy here, and I apologize if I'm getting preachy, but this is what Buddhism really is about. I'm far too attached to coffee, by the way. I need to learn to detach from coffee because my true meaning does come from coffee. So the Four Noble Truths are: suffering exists. Suffering is caused by attachment. The way to avoid suffering is through detachment. And the fourth noble truth is the way to understand detachment is through what's called the Eightfold Path. And your book has a wonderful chart about the Eightfold Path. I'm not going to go into all of it because it's all there for you. There are 8 ways that we can learn to detach: right thought, right action, right word, right mindfulness, right behavior. Sort of the 10 commandments of Buddhism. There's 8 of them, and they're all the things we need to do to learn to detach, to learn to understand where people come from in a way that helps us become better human beings and more compassionate. That's Buddhism there's a lot more to Buddhism, but that's Buddhism in a nutshell. There's a few things that help us in that. I want to talk to you about meditation and mindfulness for a minute. Mindfulness is the practice, the Buddhist practice. It's a buzzword now in American pop psychology too, but the Buddhists have had it for 3,000 years. Mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment. That's all mindfulness is. I'm learning to be mindful in the moment. This is also a very Christian practice too, because for many, many years we had the Christian mystics, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, some of the great, wonderful mystics, St. Teresa of Lisieux, some of the great mystics of Christianity. One example is Jean-Pierre de Caussade, who was a 17th century Jesuit priest who wrote a book called The Sacrament of the Present Moment, how every moment is an opportunity to meet God. That's sort of where Buddhism and Christianity, again, meet for me. Buddhism talks about mindfulness, the idea that we are mindful every single moment of where we are and what's happening in us. And that helps us to practice compassion. When I am mindful, I can practice compassion. One of my favorite books on this, by the way, is called Living Buddha, Living Christ. It's by a man named Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich is spelled T-H-I-C, not N-H-A-T, Han, H-A-N. Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich is a Vietnamese monk who lives now in Plum Village, France. He's into his 90s at this point. He was exiled from Vietnam for protesting the Vietnam War. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King Jr. back in the 1960s. So Thich Nhat Hanh has had a very, very long and distinguished career as a Buddhist teacher, philosopher, working for social justice and for peace with compassion. It's a great book if you want to know more about this, particularly if you're Christian and want to know about Buddhism. It's excellent. But Thich uses this example about mindfulness. And it comes to this idea, this interplay between suffering and compassion. And for me, it's perfect. Let me share it with you. The bully on the playground at school, or the bully on the playground at work, or the bully in your family, whoever your bully is, okay? He uses the playground example. Someone is a bully to you. You can get angry and get revenge. You can hold a grudge. All of that is very, very natural, but it doesn't help you to be a better person. That's not compassion. Compassion realizes that if I have suffering, everyone has suffering. The person who bullies me is suffering. I don't know what that suffering is. I don't need to know what that suffering is. Maybe I'm not intended to know what that suffering is. Maybe there's something in that kid's home life. Maybe there's something in them that is causing them in some way to act inappropriately. Anger issues, abusive family, whatever it might be. There's something going on there that's causing suffering in that person. And suffering, by the way, for Buddhists, suffering is defined as disturbing emotions. Okay, so suffering is not pain in terms of I have terrible cancer and I'm suffering. Suffering is disturbing emotions. Suffering is anger, resentment, bitterness, hurt, fear, jealousy, disturbing emotions, emotions that do not bring us peace. That's suffering, okay? Emotional suffering. The bully is suffering. And I need to be compassionate enough to realize that the way they act the way they do is because they're suffering, just like I am. I don't know why or how, but that's not the point. The point is that they're suffering too, because they're human. Now, that sounds like you're giving them a pass. You are not. Because what that teaches me is, in compassion, I remember their suffering and it begins to free me from what's holding me on, from what's gripping me, my anger, my resentment, my ego. How dare you talk to me that way? I deserve better than this. There's an ego involved there. I can let go of the ego by realizing that in remembering his suffering, the bully's suffering, I can let him go and realize that it's never been about me. He bullies me because of who he is. He's hurting. And I don't need to know what that hurt is. All I need to know is I don't need to carry it because it was never about me. It was about him. That abusive family member, that abusive relationship that we've been through in life, it was never about you. It was about them. It was about their suffering, their past, their anger, their addiction, their whatever it is. And the quicker we can let it go and realize wasn't about us. We didn't cause it. We didn't bring it on ourselves. We didn't deserve it. This was about them. To be very blunt, it was their shit, not ours. It doesn't make it mean. It just means that I can now let you go and realize that I don't have to harbor resentment. I don't have to want bad things for you. I can wish you well and hope that you get what you need to be whole. And I can walk away from you and have a healthy relationship with healthy boundaries because your issues were never about me. I can let that go because the bully was never about me. The bully was about him. And so I can walk away and let him go and walk on my own and realize I can be a decent person whether that person wants me in their life or not. That's practicing compassion and mindfulness. Here's where mindfulness comes in. And I'm sorry, I'm going really long here, guys. I apologize, but there's so much here to talk about. Mindfulness is about stopping, learning to stop to get rid of all the stuff that's clouding your judgment and think about where you are. When the bully is bullying me, my first reaction might be to fight back. My first reaction might be to be defensive. My first reaction might be to be hurt or to withdraw or to feel like a little kid inside and feel helpless and wounded. Mindfulness teaches me to stop where I am, clear my mind, and think about what's happening. What's really going on here? Why am I acting the way I act? Why am I responding the way I respond? Let me give you another example. Someone says something to you, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your parent, whatever, and it triggers you. And all of a sudden you want to go off and you begin to escalate and the defensive wall meets the defensive wall. And all of a sudden there's this conflict between two people. Mindfulness teaches us to be able to stop and say, what's going on here? Why am I acting the way I'm acting? Why am I feeling the anxiety or the anger or the defensiveness or the hurt? What's really happening in this situation? And am I responding appropriately? Or am I overreacting to something? Mindfulness teaches me to stop, to take stock in what's going on, and to really evaluate which voices that are playing in my head right now are the real ones. Am I playing on old tapes of people that have said to me in the past? Am I playing on the frustration and fear of my own anxieties? Did something else happen today in my life that's made me already frustrated or tense? And am I now just sort of bursting because I've held it in all day long at work? Mindfulness teaches me to just stop and think about what's really happening in this moment. What is it in this moment that's making me feel how I feel, and how in this very moment can I understand suffering, and can I practice the gift of compassion? Now, how do we get to mindfulness? Speaking of my attachment. Buddhism is known for meditation. Meditation is probably the most common Buddhist practice. People say to me a couple things about meditation. I can't meditate. My mind wanders. I can't meditate. I've tried. It doesn't work for me. My response? No shit. If you could meditate, you wouldn't need to. All of our minds wander. All of us struggle with meditation. I have good days and I have bad days. At the monastery in Kathmandu, we meditated 5 times a day for about an hour each. That's 5 hours of meditation a day. The last 2 days we were there, we meditated for about 14 hours every single day. Now, there were breaks. There were different kinds of meditation. It wasn't straight through meditation by any means. We never really meditated for more than about a half an hour at a time. And that's about where I am now. I can sit and meditate for a half an hour and not even think twice about it. It just passes by. But meditation is, I sit on my prayer mat, my meditation cushion, and I do different kinds of breathing and focus on my breathing. I focus on where I am, the movement of my stomach, the breath coming in and out of my nostrils. Meditation is not about peace. You don't meditate to find peace. You don't meditate to find calm. That is a misnomer. Buddhism is not about you. It's about other people. Meditation is not about you. You don't meditate to be calm, although the byproduct of meditation is calm. And it really does work. I have to tell you, I had a headache. Several months back, I had a headache, and anybody of you who have had, oh my gosh, I can't speak today. Any of you who have real headaches would probably smack me for saying I have a headache, but I don't get headaches, and so when I do, I'm a big baby. I'm a man, so I'm a big baby anyway. I just could not get rid of it. I had coffee, I had Tylenol, nothing would cut this headache. I went in, I meditated for 20 minutes, and the headache was gone. So there is a relaxation to meditation. But the idea of meditation is it trains the mind. That's all it does. It trains your mind. So when you meditate, I literally will just think about my breath in and out of my body. All I'll do is think about the rising and lowering of your navel, of your belly button. How does your stomach rise and fall or in and out as you breathe? It's that simple. And then you'll find yourself wandering in your mind. And all you do is bring yourself back and just remind yourself, I'm meditating. Bring yourself back again. And you'll do it every 5 or 6 seconds. And then you'll find you're doing it every 8 or 9 seconds. Then you're doing it every 12 or 13 seconds. And you're just getting better and better at keeping yourself focused on what really is going on in you. The purpose of meditation, again, is not to make you calm, bring you peace. The purpose of meditation is to train your mind. That's what you're doing. You're training your mind to stop the external things and to focus, laser focus on the things that matter. That's meditation. Why is that important? Because when you're in the heat of the moment and you're ready to fly and you're like me and the anger gets a-going, you can stop. All those voices can get deciphered through, and you've trained your mind to just be able to sift through all that crap and come down to what's really going on. Meditation practices us for mindfulness. It prepares us to practice mindfulness, okay? Last thing I want to talk to you about that is very important with Buddhism is the issue of reincarnation, endless beginnings, and karma. I'll try to make this quick because this could go on for hours. It really could. Buddhism does not believe in a creator God. There is no beginning and there is no end. Time is endless. And so there has been, before this life, endless other lives. You have not existed in this life. You have existed in countless other lives from beginning of time till now. There has never been a beginning when you did not exist in one form or another. That little spark of consciousness that is you existed in many, many lives before and will exist in many lives ahead. This is, by the way, another area that I'm not, as a religion, Buddhism would not apply to me. This is not my particular belief. This is Buddhism now. And so there is no beginning and end in Buddhism. It's this constant cycle that just continues over and over and over again throughout eternity. The issue then is karma. Karma is not what we understand in America. The whole karma's a bitch kind of thing that, something bad happens, karma. Not really. Every action you have has a reaction. Everything we do builds up karma. Good karma, bad karma. Again, not really my philosophy as a Christian, but this is Buddhism. Throughout your many, many lives, you rack up karma, good and bad karma. Eventually, that karma comes to what's called fruition. It bears fruit. When the karma bears fruit, responses happen in your life. The karma comes back, good or bad. So you have had endless lives. You had endless lives before you for a Buddhist. In those endless lives, quite frankly, there's nothing that I have not done. In my multiple dozens of hundreds of existences before this one, I have probably committed murder. I have probably committed adultery. I have told lies. I have hurt people. Maybe not in this life, but in previous lives. And I'm not even conscious of that. But Buddhists would say, you don't even know it, but it's happened. And so when something happens to me now that's bad, that's that karmic energy that I planted in a previous life coming back to fruition today. And that today is biting me in the butt in a way that I'm now not enjoying. But that is the karma that has come before me. When something good happens in my life, that is the good karmic seeds that I've planted in previous lives now coming to fruition and giving me good karma. It's not so much a way of feeling guilty about our past. It's a way. It's a philosophical way of thinking about our behavior now. I can't control what happened in the past, but I can control how I behave now, and I want to plant good seeds for future karma because I don't know when that karma is going to come back to get me, when that karma is going to come to fruition. Come back to get me is an appropriate term because it sounds vindictive and mean. I didn't mean it that way. When it comes to fruition. So, karma, then, is the concept of our good and bad behavior that manifests energy, and that energy comes back to get to fruition in future lives, and we don't know when. If I do something right now and I am mean or nasty to someone, 500 years from now, the energy that is me will be someone else's energy in the future, in a future life, and I may end up with some sort of behavior, some sort of response to that I don't know where it came from, and I planted that seed today. That's karma. Now, let's talk about the soul for a second, because this all plays into it. Buddhism does not have a God. Buddhism believes that there is enlightenment. There is a source of enlightenment. That source of enlightenment is what lives in each of us and lives exterior to us. I would say that's God. They would not use that term. It is not divine in the personal sense of a divine God. When you are reincarnated, for a Buddhist, when I am reincarnated, it's not that I lived in the Wild West in the 1800s and I could go back and see me in, a hat and neckerchief and spurs and riding a horse. That's not what it means. You did not exist before. It's that little spark of energy. It's that eternal spark somewhere back in here. They call it a spark of consciousness. It's that little spark of consciousness that goes from life to life to life to life and is you. That is your essence. As a Christian, I'd refer to that as soul. They don't use that term, but again, I don't see much difference as a liberal Christian. That little spark of energy that spark of essence, of spirit that goes from life to life to life, that's what makes you you. You will not know you in your next life. If you did a time machine, you wouldn't recognize you. Because it's not you. It's that spirit, that spark of your consciousness that goes from life to life. And that spark of consciousness is what is your essence. That's what makes you you. It sort of goes back to another heavy Buddhist philosophy is the absence of I. It's the absence of self, that self doesn't exist. Let me go into this with you as well for about 5 minutes. I didn't intend on talking about this, but here we are. What is this? You may have said this is a pen. Is it really a pen? I don't know if it's a pen or not. I mean, think about it. My dog would call this a chew toy. Matter of fact, she has called it a chew toy. An ant would call this a bridge, right? We call it a pen because it has a penness to it. It has a point. It has springs. It has a cartridge. It has a ball point at the end. All of this together makes it a pen. It's about function. It functions as a pen. This pen is different than a feather pen, a quill pen. Why? It's very different, but it has the same function. Okay? Pen does not exist. Pen is not a thing. I know this is going to blow your mind. This is heavy Buddhist philosophy. This is a metal cylinder with ink and a spring and a ballpoint and a little clicker. We call this thing pen. But this thing could be very different from culture to culture to culture. If someone came from in a time capsule from the 17th century and we said pen, they would think feather and an ink well. This would not be their concept of pen. Pen does not exist. It only exists in its form. Now, I know you're hating me right now because you're probably starting to spin your head. In the same way, Buddhist philosophy would say, you don't exist. I don't exist. There is no me. There is no I. I have flesh. I have hair. Not as much as I used to have. I have bones. I have teeth. I have eyes. I have internal organs. But I am a combination of those things. The I-ness of me, the penness of the pen, is not in its composition. It's in its function. The I-ness of me is not in this. It's in its function. If I lose my arm in a tragic accident, I'm still going to be me. My body will change. Lord knows it has changed. Your bodies have changed. Your bodies will continue to change. They say that every 7 years we shed our skin. Cells change. What makes you you is not this. There is no you. You do not exist. You are nothing more than the composite of your mom and father, your mother and father, in physical form, and your memories, your thoughts, your internal voices, your education, your experience, all those things that make you you. You do not exist. Now, what makes you you? What makes you you is your ability to love, compassion, kindness, mercy, Those are the things that make me, me. Okay? If I was in a horrible accident and I was scarred and physically deformed, I would still be me. If I lost my arms or legs, I would still be me. This stuff, if I get arthritis when I get older and I can't stand anymore and I can't get around the way I want to, I'm still going to be me. I am not defined by this. This is external and function. This is external and function. These are parts. This is parts, but it doesn't make me me. What makes me me is the ability to love, the ability to be a kind and compassionate human being. Let's go back to the beginning of our talk, which was exactly 41 minutes ago, and I apologize for that. It's all about compassion and suffering for Buddhism, isn't it? It's all about understanding that idea that everyone suffers. Everything brings suffering. And the way to get over that suffering is to realize that we aren't attached to things, that they don't give us meaning. We can enjoy them. I can look in the mirror and be proud of how I look. But you know what? If I look in the mirror and I'm not proud of how I look, I'm still a decent, loving human being, and that's what makes me me. When a woman comes to me as her pastor and she has breast cancer and she has to lose a breast and she's devastated by that, one of the things I try to get her to understand is that doesn't make you you. You're still the same compassionate, loving, beautiful person you've always been. This does not make you beautiful. That's Buddhism. It's this interplay between compassion and suffering. If you want to get rid of suffering, get rid of your attachments. Enjoy life. Enjoy the things you have. Have fun. Enjoy your relationships. Have a wonderful life, but keep it in its proper perspective. This stuff, it's wonderful, but it doesn't define you. You are defined by one thing and one thing only, and that's your ability to be compassionate and loving to the world around you. That's Buddhism. I hope you've loved it. I hope it's impacted you, and have a wonderful week, guys. Bye.